Okay, welcome everybody. Really appreciate you being here today, April 15th. We are 2 weeks out from the first reporting for the American Rescue Plan Act funds that many of you are going to have to do. We're going to talk through a number of issues today, just a little housekeeping to start. First of all, my name is Mark Garst. I am the League of Oregon Cities lobbyist for tax, finance, and economic development. So that means that I'm your lobbyist at the Capitol building here in Salem, and I try to represent you guys as best I can, cities large and small, on everything that the legislature is up to. So that's me. We're on Zoom today. We are being recorded, so please mute your microphones unless you're trying to speak. And it's up to you whether you want to be on camera or not, but just know that we are being recorded, and so try not to roll your eyes at any of my jokes. We have a slide deck that should be up. If the view doesn't really allow you to see much of the slide deck, in the top right corner of your Zoom browser, you should be able to change that view to get a little bit more, a little bit less of the PowerPoint, if that's what you want. So we're going to go ahead and just get started. All right, so here's what we're going to try and get through today. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the deadline, what it applies to. We're going to talk about some of the spending guidance that's come out. We're not going to do a ton on this, but since I last spoke with you folks, the final rule has come out. Treasury's done some great webinars there, so we didn't feel like it was necessary for us to do it. Better to get it from the horse's mouth. But we will talk a little bit about that new final rule. We're going to talk about reporting, obviously. That's going to be the focus of the conversation today. We know we've heard concerns, questions from a lot of you. This has been a great opportunity for me to meet a lot of you, which I've appreciated. I know you're doing your best, but there's a lot of guidance out there. A lot of responsibility comes with these dollars. And so what we're really going to focus on is what is the simplest way for you guys to get your reporting done. I know some of you are going to be overachievers. You're going to do more than you have to do, but we're going to really focus on the easiest way for you to get the required reporting completed by April 30th. We'll talk about other resources that are out there, mostly documents and webinars that the U.S. Treasury has up. And certainly throughout this PowerPoint, you're going to see links. Anywhere it's blue and underlined, that means that there's a link there, and you can go right to the document that was the source of that information. And this PowerPoint will be available, as will the recording, probably Monday noon at the latest. And you should be able to go straight to the League of Oregon Cities website, front page. It should be right there under latest news. And then finally, we're going to do a Q&A. We'll have some recorded Q&A, and then I'll probably turn the recording off in case some of you just want to vent, and we'll do a portion of that will not be recorded. All right, so what are we talking about today? American Rescue Plan Act, lots of money flowing into the state, counties, cities, the state, we all got money. But what we're focusing on today is the April 30th reporting deadline for smaller cities. Treasury calls smaller cities, typically under 50,000, they call them NEUs, or non-entitlement units of government. And so far, NEUs haven't had to do any reporting. Our larger cities certainly have had reports that were already due. Some cases they had interim reports. There are other reports around tracking metrics and types of things that they've been required to do. But this is your first report for smaller cities that's going to be required. So we're talking about ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, and you'll hear me refer to ARPA. If you look at the guidance, often Treasury will call it the SLFRF program, which is the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds program. That is technically the part of ARPA that we're talking about. It's the smaller subset of money that was given to states, counties, cities, where you got a particular allocation for your jurisdiction. And so you'll see that on a lot of the slides, because a lot of these slides are taken from various Treasury presentations. Specifically, it's $242.9 million that went to the smaller cities in Oregon. Again, cities typically less than 50,000. And we're talking about what really is the project and expenditure report. That's the report that you're going to have due on April 30th. What are we not talking about? We're not talking about the money that went to metropolitan cities. They had their own reporting requirements, and they got their money directly from Treasury. You got your money from the Department of Administrative Services. They have more reporting that they have to do compared to you guys. And so we're not talking about that today. We're not talking about money that the state might have sent you through the American Rescue Plan Act. So there was $240 million of legislator projects that many of you were the beneficiaries of. There's $276 million of water projects that are being administered through Business Oregon. There's $124 million of transportation projects that went through the Department of Transportation. Those are all ARPA dollars, and the state will require you to provide them some information so that they can report to Treasury, but that's not what you're supposed to report on. You're really reporting on that particular allocation that you received from the Department of Administrative Services that was yours to decide how to spend. That's what you're going to be reporting on April 30th, and that's going to be the topic of the conversation today. So here's the reporting schedule that's out there. They made one little change that said some NEUs, again, that's you typically, who received more than 10 million will have to report quarterly now. But I don't think any of the NEUs in Oregon received more than 10 million. As long as your total award less than $10 million, you're going to report annually. And the first report that you're going to have, again, that project and expenditure report, is going to be on April 30th. That's it. There's other categories here. The interim report, you don't have to do that. The recovery plan performance report, you don't have to do that. And so the only report that you're going to need to focus on is that, again, project expenditure report that's going to be annually starting in 2 weeks. So a little bit on guidance. Again, I don't want to get into spending guidance too much today. We're really focused on getting that reporting done here in the next 2 weeks. And I know that you guys have been working your way through the guidance, thinking about that as you've developed your spending plans. But I do want to talk a little bit about the final rule. So for a long time, we were operating under what was called the interim final rule. And here at the beginning of the year, Treasury came out with what they called the final rule. It replaces that interim final rule. But if you made a decision to spend before the final rule became effective on April 1st, you can still follow the interim rule. Now, if you made a decision to spend in March and followed the final rule rather than the interim, that's okay too. So Treasury's kind of letting us have it both ways on that. They're not going to enforce things, even though, again, that final rule didn't really technically become effective until April 1st. There's a number of webinars. We're going to talk about a lot of resources that are out there, but Treasury did, right when that final rule came out, they did one that was called the Introduction to the Final Rule. And that one does a really good job of kind of talking about all the differences that happen between the interim rule and the new changes in the final rule. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at that. The final rule is big. It's huge, right? It is, I forget, 177 pages, something. It's gigantic. So, I would really encourage you, as you are talking about a particular type of spending, to, I understand you may not read page for page, word for word, that entire thing, but get familiar with that Control F function, for searching through a PDF document. You can go right into that document, you hold down Control, you hit F, and then you can search for any word. So if you're going to work on premium pay for essential workers, search for that. If you're going to do something to do with housing, search for housing, search for affordable, and you'll find all the guidance that is around that area without having to, go through every single bit of that rule word for word. And often when you guys give me a call, that's how I find the information that I send you, is that I just use that Control F function, and that's how I get through that monster. The final rule, first of all, the final rule is great in that it gives us more flexibility in how to use the funds. But there are some things that stay the same. There are still some restrictions on how you can use these dollars that don't change as a part of the final rule. So you can't use this to give tax breaks. I don't think it's going to be a big problem for us. If the state makes a change, that's not your fault. If you were to say waive lodging taxes as a form of economic development for hotels, that might be problematic, right? You cannot use American Rescue Plan Act dollars to give tax breaks. That's not allowed. And I think that was something probably that the Democrats in Congress wanted. one that I think the Republicans in Congress wanted was you cannot use these dollars to make extraordinary contributions to pension funds. So you can't pay off your PERS UAL, right? Now, if you do payroll as a part of the American Rescue Plan Act spending that you do, and as a part of that, you make a normal contribution to PERS or a pension, then that's okay. But you can't make extraordinary contributions and you can't pay down those old liabilities. There are some other restrictions that were already out there, and it clarifies, the final rule clarifies those a bit, but it doesn't really change much. Can't use it for paying off old debt, can't use it to replenish rainy day funds or reserves, can't use it to satisfy a settlement or judgment. Those are hard no's, and you're not allowed to use the funds for that. Couple new ones that they came up with. You can't use it to undermine COVID-19 mitigation practices. I don't think anybody here is going to pay people, not to get vaccinated, but that's kind of what they're talking about. And then also there are some new restrictions around conflict of use that go along with the uniform guidance. And so I would just be very mindful of conflict of interest. And, if you're hiring a relative to do some of the work that's going to be a part of this program, you definitely want to get into the final rule and look at what those restrictions look like. All right. So what can you do? It becomes more flexible, but it kind of follows the same standards that we had in the interim rule. You've got your 4 big categories. You can use it to replace lost revenue. You can use it for public health and to counter the economic effects of the pandemic. You can use it for premium pay for essential workers, and then you can use it for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Those are kind of the big 4. But it gets more flexible for us. So the biggest change in the final rule, and we're going to talk about this a ton today, is that the interim final rule had said that in order to determine how much lost revenue you had, and again, you can use whatever that amount is to pay for general government services. So it's the most flexible category. The interim final rule had said that you had to do this calculation. You had to compare what your revenues were like before COVID to what they were like after COVID. They included an escalator for what the increase should have been. And then whatever the difference was, that delta, that was how much revenue loss you could claim. And you had to calculate it year by year at the end of 21, at the end of 22, at the end of 23, at the end of 24, and you would add them all up. And at the end, that would be the amount that you would be able to claim for revenue loss. Treasury kept that, but they kind of got rid of it for you guys, because what they said now is that there is a $10 million standard allowance for revenue loss for every jurisdiction. And so, unless we have some folks who just decided to check this out, even though they're not an EU, I think for everybody on this call, that should mean that you can use your entire allocation of American Rescue Plan Act dollars under the revenue replacement category. And Treasury did that on purpose. They're worried about you guys. They know that, a lot of you folks, you have one person in your office maybe who's handling all the finances for the city. They also sometimes have to answer the phones, and they have to deal with, issues that are going on in town. And this is a lot of work. And so recognizing that, they created this $10 million standard allowance for revenue loss, thinking of you. And we're going to talk about what it means, but it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you use the dollars. And it will give you a lot simpler path to reporting how you spent that money. So it's for you. You should take advantage of it. And we're going to keep talking about that as we go along. Under the public health sector, it relaxed some of the restrictions around certain activities that you could do. It makes it easier to do programs to respond to housing. It makes it easier to do programs to help out disproportionately affected populations, people who maybe got hit a little bit harder by COVID. It streamlined some of the requirements around paying premium pay to workers. And so it makes that a little bit simpler to figure out what's allowed and what's not allowed. And then it expanded some of the projects that would be allowed in the broadband category, in the infrastructure category, especially around water and sewer. So in the interim final rule, it said you had to be a project that would be able to meet the standards of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund or the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. And that's still true, but then they created some exceptions where, you know, some big reservoir projects and things that increase capacity would actually be allowed. So it increased flexibility in pretty much every category. But again, the big one is number one on the slide here, the $10 million standard allowance for revenue loss. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. All right. So again, you have a choice to make. You can either take the $10 million standard allowance, or you're still allowed to use that super complex formula that they had come up with, calculated at the end of the year. But nobody on this call is getting more than $10 million. So I don't see any reason why any of you would choose to do the standard calculation. A little bit more about it. It's a one-time election, all right? You get one shot at this to choose whether you want to take the standard allowance or whether you want to do the regular formula calculation. Again, take the standard allowance. You cannot change that decision in future reporting. So when you go in here in the next 2 weeks and you make that decision in the system, and we'll show you the screens where it happens in the Treasury portal. I've got some screen grabs. That's it. That's your one shot. So think hard about what you're doing on that section in particular. Treasury wants you to take it, right? They created this for you, for smaller cities, and they expect that you're going to use it, and they want you to use it. Honestly, it makes their life easier too. You know, you have to fill out one report. They have to review 24,000 of them, and it makes it a lot easier on them if it's more simplified reporting. And that's what they're trying to get at with this standard allowance. You can still do what you had planned to do, right? So you had seen that interim final rule, you had done council meetings, you had done outreach to your constituents, you'd come up with a plan to spend these dollars. I'm putting X into broadband, I'm putting X into a water project, I'm going to do this for small businesses in my community. You had come up with this plan. You can still do all of those things, but you can just report it as revenue replacement dollars, right? You can just report it under the revenue replacement category. And again, we'll get into the nitty gritty of what that looks like when you go into the system. But, you know, just because your council approved a particular spending plan doesn't mean now that you can't report under the revenue replacement category. This is not directing you on how to spend the money. It's directing you on how to report the spending. And it's going to make it easier. It's going to make your life easier. So again, this is it. This is your easy button. Are you going to hit it, or are you going to be an overachiever? I got to say, I've talked to some of you who are going to be overachievers, and I get it. You know, you did a lot of homework at the beginning. You figured out that you had a qualified census tract. You decided that you were going to do a particular project to help people in those census tract, and you're thinking now, I still want to report that in that category. Economic response to the pandemic. You can do that. Or you can hit the easy button. It's really up to you. Today, I'm going to focus more on the easy button for a couple of reasons. First of all, Treasury's got another webinar that's going to come out on reporting into other program categories. And so I've only really seen them get into detail on how to do it under this revenue replacement category. But aside from that, it's more complicated, and you know, you can do some homework on your own, I'm sure. All right. So again, when you are spending in this, you know, for revenue replacement, you are allowed to spend these dollars on general government services. And so what does that mean? So I'm going to try not to read to you a ton today, but this is taken out of a document that the Treasury has up called the Overview of the Final Rule. And again, you'll be able to click into any of these documents out of the PowerPoint that'll pop up on the League's website on Monday. So spending on government services. So it says government services generally include any service traditionally provided by the government unless Treasury has said otherwise. And then it gives some examples. So for us, you know, road building and maintenance or other infrastructure, there's an example of what you can spend it on. Health services, general government administration, staff, and administrative facilities. So you want to do something at your city hall, you say you want to do a ventilation system. You could have previously done that and reported it in the health category. That was one of the allowed uses in that category. But now you can just go ahead and do that in this government services category and report it and not have to give as much detail on when you do the reporting. Provision of police, fire, and other public safety services, including purchase of vehicles, allowed use. So you could dump all of this money into your police budget, and and then you would free up some other dollars. That's an option for you, and some other states are recommending it. It is something you could do, and I'm not telling you don't do it. Hold on, I'm going to mute here real quick. I'm not telling you not to do it, but if you're going to spend this money to take care of the pandemic, it would probably be in your best interest to report projects where you're dealing with the issues of the pandemic one way or the other. Not strictly required under this government services category, but we're trying to maintain the public trust on how we spent these dollars. And so, I would encourage you to, try and stick to things that make sense one way or the other. But maybe your city lost a ton of money during the pandemic. Your lodging taxes were down. You had parking meters, and all of a sudden nobody's parking because nobody's driving into the office, and you just don't have the ability to pay your cops otherwise. Well, you can put this into your police budget. That's an allowed use of these dollars. And then down at the bottom, it says government services is the most flexible category, and funds are subject to streamlined reporting and compliance requirements. But it does say that those other restrictions, can't pay off your pension, no old debt, no paying off legal settlements, all the hard restrictions still apply, but this category is pretty much wide open. So it creates two paths, okay? And if you look over on the right here, it says this slide is from Treasury's NEU reporting overview. Sometimes you'll see a circle on these slides, a red circle, and then I put those in to kind of emphasize things. But here, where it says fast and simple, I did not put that in. That was from the Treasury's webinar that they presented on how they think NEU should report. And so they are really encouraging you to use this fast and simple option for reporting, which is to submit all of your projects under the expenditure category 6 revenue replacement. And again, we'll get into the slides that will show where that actually occurs in the Treasury portal. But basically, they're saying, take all of your projects and just report them as revenue replacement. So, you're going to set up a vaccine clinic. I know that not many of you probably have done that, but let's just say that you were. That clearly would fall under public health. And Treasury wants you to do that kind of thing. But they're saying here, okay, we know it could fit under public health, but it's easier if you report it as revenue replacement project instead, and then you'll be subject to less onerous reporting requirements. But they still want you to do things that are spread throughout the guidance. They still want you to invest in water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. They still want you to deal with public health. They still want you to deal with the economic effects of the pandemic. They still want you to think about a payment for essential workers. All those things that are allowed uses in the Big Four, they still want you to do those things, but they're saying when it comes time to report, this is your fast and simple option. Just report each of those projects as a revenue replacement project, and we won't need to get as much information from you. And we can make things easier on you because we understand that you may not have the city, the kind of staff that a city with a population over 50,000 would have to go in and deal with all the reporting requirements that would otherwise be in place. So I want to point out something here. It's not all, it's not all smiles. There's a little bit of uncertainty because here on this slide, it says no recipient level reporting for April. And so Treasury may come back to you a little bit later and ask for more information on some of these projects. And I'm going to talk at the end about what I think that will look like when we talk about record keeping. But I just want to, keep in mind right now, we're talking about what information you have to stick into this portal. Just because you don't have to put all that backup information into the Treasury system doesn't mean that you shouldn't have it in your file. You still want to keep really good records. You still want to be able to account for every penny. You still want to be able to show, that you spent this money wisely. And so, don't think that your responsibilities go away because reporting gets easier. That's not necessarily what this means. So again, you got two options. You can submit all of your projects under revenue replacement, or you can submit under other expenditure categories as well. Those Other categories are going to have detailed project level reporting, subrecipient level reporting required, and there's going to be other items that you have to fill out as a part of those other categories. So we'll talk a little bit more again about record keeping later. Okay, it looks like I've got one question in chat. Let's see if I can pull this off. Oh, we've only received half of the amount. Yes, you will. I will get to that in a couple slides to answer your question here, Bev. So give me 1 second. All right, and yes, Janet, I'll hit that too. There was that plus up payment. We'll talk about that pretty quick here. So first of all, have you taken care of the first step? If you haven't done this yet, you're behind, honestly. You know, this has been available to you for a month. I hate to be a jerk, but you're behind if you have not already gotten in, logged into the system, set up your users, and made sure that those 3 documents that you need to upload are in the system. So there is a webinar that goes through page by page on the portal and shows you what you have to enter in order to set up your account and make sure that all of that is taken care of. A lot of information is already previously filled out for you. Some of that information might be wrong, and you need to go in there and correct issues right away. Also, you have to upload a few documents. You know, you had an agreement that you signed with the Department of Administrative Services that said that you would follow the rules. You had an agreement that said that you wouldn't violate civil rights law. And then you had supplied the Department of Administrative Services with a number for your pre-COVID budget. And so those, you need to put those 2 documents in. The signed agreements are only signed by you. DAS never signed them, but you have the version that you had signed. You need to make sure that that gets uploaded into the system for the, we've promised to follow the ARPA rules document and for the civil rights document. And then on the budget, you need to provide them a document that supports the budget number that you gave Department of Administrative Services for your pre-COVID budget. And most likely that's just going to be the, you know, last budget resolution. It could have been a supplemental, but it'll just most likely be the last budget resolution that you did pre-COVID. So just got to get those 3 documents in, got to get your users all set up. And then you at least know that when the time comes to hop on the system, there's a lower chance of you having problems actually accessing the Treasury portal. So get on that. There'll be 2 links here. Again, there's a little, I think it's 11 page, it's pretty short document, this user guide that walks you through how to do all those things, including little pictures of the screens. And then there's a Treasury video where a guy spends 20 minutes, goes through and takes care of all of it. All right, after you've gotten that done, now you're ready. Okay, you're ready to report. So 2 kind of critical documents that you're going to want to take a look at on the reporting side. Here at the beginning of April, they put out this updated project and expenditure report user guide. That's got step-by-step instructions, again, on how to fill out all the fields in the portal. It's pretty big, but most of it's addenda, right? So the appendices start at page 50. So really it's less than 50 pages. And if you're not doing reporting by other project categories, if you're putting it all in revenue replacement, you're not going to have to read most, you know, you're not going to have to focus on most of that document. But you may want to take a look at it anyway to see, you know, okay, well, if I was doing a broadband project and I was going to report it as you know, in the broadband category, what would they want to see from me? And maybe as you're doing the project, you just want to maintain those records in case somebody comes back later and asks questions. So that's a helpful document. Also, they did a webinar. It's pretty short. I think it's like 25 minutes, and we're going to take a lot of slides from it here in the next section of this. But it walks through how to, you see a guy actually go through and fill out all the fields to do full reporting under revenue replacement. And it's pretty straightforward. If you Google US Treasury YouTube, you can probably find it pretty easily. I think there's probably a link to it also on the reporting page of Treasury's webpage. So that thing is out there, and also something maybe that you want to watch. We're going to do something pretty similar here in the next couple minutes. All right, so what do you do? So again, project and expense report user guide, it's got the link to the portal. You guys should have received multiple emails that tell you where to where to actually, go to log in and who your authorized users are, the first person that needs to log in and set up the account and all that stuff. Those should be in emails. But and also the book again talks about how to get there. But what you want to do is you want to navigate to the compliance reports part of the website, and you're going to see a number of different reports that are being filled out through this same system. But the one that we're focused on is the again SLFRF, the state and local fiscal recovery funds. So you go to your reports here, and then you're going to see what reports are available for you to fill out. Okay, you're going to hit this blue check mark to select that you want to do the report for the project and expenditure report, and then it's going to take you to a page that looks like this. You're not really going to be doing any bulk upload templates. That's something that larger cities are probably going to do. I don't think you will be anyway. I suspect that won't be necessary for your reporting. But these four sections on the left are the tabs of this portal that you're going to need to fill out to complete your April 30th reporting. So you've got your recipient profile, you've got a project overview, then you'll go to a tab called Recipient Specific, which is where you'll make that election for the revenue replacement. And then finally, you have to complete the certification. So that you're only going to have to do 4 of these tabs here. So first, recipient profile. You're going to go in, most of the information is going to be pre-filled out for you. And what you're looking for is mistakes. And there's a little field that says, please report any discrepancies on the recipient information. And so you can fix that. Okay, Nina, I see your question. I'll hit it in a minute. All right, so you've done that, you've completed that, and now you want to go to the project overview tab, and you're going to add a new project. So what if you haven't spent any of the money yet? Then I don't think you have a project to add. I don't think that's going to be necessary, but we'll talk about what it means to have. What you're reporting on is whatever funds have been obligated and expended. And it's kind of 2 different categories. So even if you have not, written a check yet, you probably maybe have still obligated some funds. And so you would still want to report on that project. And we'll talk about what those definitions are here in a minute. But basically, let's assume that you have something that you've, spent money on and you want to go ahead and add a new project. So you're going to get a little box that's going to open up. And you want to select, again, we're assuming that you're going to hit the easy button here and you're not some kind of overachiever. You're going to select the expenditure category group 6 for revenue replacement. You're going to take the project expenditure category. There's 2 of them. There's a 6.2 that you may use, but most likely you're going to be in 6.1, provision of government services. And then you're going to need to fill out certain fields here about that particular project. So you got to have a project name, recipient project ID, and I don't know exactly if that's but created by you or if it's created by Treasury. If anybody knows the answer to that question, feel free to come off mute and school me. But I think that if you hover over each of these titles at the top of the field, it explains to you what's supposed to go in there. So I don't have access to the system, so I'm doing my best, but you'll have to put in a recipient project ID. And then that adopted budget field, that's really for cities that are much larger than you, cities over 250,000. That's an optional field for you to fill out. What you do have to include here is the obligation and expenditures. So you're going to have over on the right, you're going to have the current period obligations and the current period expenditures. And on the left, you're going to have the total obligations and the total expenditures, again, for this project. And so, you can imagine you're going to do reporting again in a year. Right now, you may have obligated a certain amount, but only expended. You may have only paid out, much lower amount of that total. But next time you're going to come in, you're going to have expended more. So you're going to add that number in, and it's going to roll up to be the total. And so those fields need to get filled out, the obligations and expenditures. And for this first reporting, the total, the cumulative and the period are going to be the same, right? Because this is the first time you've reported. Program income expended and earned, I don't think you're going to have to fill out because I don't think it's going to apply to most of your projects. But again, hover over that field, use your own judgment. And, if somehow your project did earn income, I having a hard time on that, but if it did, you might need to fill out something there. And again, if you have questions, there's going to be more information in that project and expenditure report user guide on what those fields mean exactly. And then you're going to have to do a project description. So I had said that, you know, this, that there's a webinar out there where the guy walks through and he fills out all of the fields. I don't want to be critical of Treasury. They've done a great job. They got a million things coming at them. But when he filled out this screen, he kind of pulled things from the air a little bit, right? So you'll see that he made the size of the project like 10 million. That's not super likely, right? More likely, you're going to have a much smaller number because you're only going to be using a portion of your award on this particular project. And so, you know, the obligations and expenditures are going to be much lower than the numbers that he threw out there, which was like 10 million and 5 million. You know, if you were some big metropolitan city and you were doing some huge initiative on something, maybe those would be kind of numbers you might see. But that sounds too much like the $10 million minimum allowance. And that's not what we're filling out here. We're talking about individual projects, what you're spending, okay? And then the other thing that he did on that webinar that was a little weird is in the project description category, he put teachers and playground improvements. And so that arguably would almost be like 2 projects to me, teacher salaries and playground improvements, maybe 2 different projects there. Maybe you could argue that it was a single project. And, you know, and I've met with folks who have my job at, you know, other leagues, municipal associations. I've met with the NLC on this stuff. And, you know, some states are saying you can report all of your revenue replacement as a single project. But I think that if you talk to most states, they're saying, no, you're going to have multiple projects that you're going to report. You know, so over here, I did an infrastructure project. Over here, I did a, you know, I did something to my park. You know, over here, I did an economic development project. Most states would encourage you to report those as 3 separate projects. Although some folks have just said, no, just put it in one. I spent X dollars on police, X dollars or parks, X dollars on the other thing, and include it all in one project description. I don't think that that's probably the best way to go. But if you watch that webinar, you'll see that that guy kind of leads you down that path a little bit. But I don't think that's probably technically correct. So let's talk a little bit more about obligations and expenditures. What are we reporting on, right? Is kind of the key. It's April 30th. We're going to report on, you know, what obligations and expenditures we've had up to that point. So an obligation, here are the definitions, and this is again taken from that user guide. Obligation is an order placed for property and services, contracts and subawards made, and similar transactions that require payment. All right. An expenditure is an amount that has been incurred as a liability of the entity, the service has been rendered, or the good has been delivered to the entity. So those are the definitions that you have to work with. And I'm not going to try and, you guys can read, you know, you guys can read as well as I can. And so, you know, those definitions are a little, you know, nebulous. I think some of you will be thinking, do I report this now or am I going to wait and report this on the next report? And that's a decision that you'll each have to make. But as long as you try to follow this language, should be okay, right? You know, I will say that we've had some issues at the federal level, and this is kind of more political than reporting, but we've had some serious issues at the federal level. You know, every time the Biden administration wants to spend some additional money on vaccines or on, you know, that type of thing, there's always this talk about maybe going back and clawing back some of the ARPA allocations that went to the states or local governments. And so, you know, in a big picture, federal political level, it's better if we have more obligations now. And that might be kind of contradictory of what I told some of you early on in this process, where I was like, whoa, tap the brakes. You only get this money once. Let's think hard about how we want to spend it. And, you know, I think there's still some truth to that too. But politically, if Oregon has already spent or obligated a lot of the dollars that are available to cities, it does make it less likely that those dollars could be clawed back. So I'm just throwing that out there. That's my problem, not yours. But I do want to make you aware, that issue with someone trying to come back and claw back dollars is possible. It becomes less likely, I think, once you guys get your second tranche payment here sometime around July 1. I think it'll become less likely, but I'm sharing that obviously for a reason. So maybe something to think about. Okay, we have, recipient project ID information bubble says unique ID assigned by the recipient. Okay, thanks for that, Tara. So that is one that you guys get to choose. And then Ann's question, can you report salaries as one project, though they're different departments? That's up to you, Ann. I think you probably could. Again, they had teacher salaries and playground equipment as their example. So they were more disparate than that, but we'll actually talk on the next slide about what projects mean. So save the project, check the status, add additional projects if applicable. So you're going to get 3 green checks here. That means that everything's all taken care of. And if there's issues with how you filled out the report, you're going to get some yellow or red examples. So that is Janet. It says the unique ID references the new number on SAM portal. I think that might be on the first page where you have all your recipient information, the information about your jurisdiction. But on the project specific pop-up where you're entering information just on the specific project, I think it is asking for maybe a number that you guys get to assign to each of your projects. Okay, what if none of the funds have been obligated yet? Again, then I don't think that you are going to be reporting any projects if you haven't obligated any funds yet. But I think you still want to go in and make your decision as to whether or not you're going to take the revenue replacement formula or that standard allowance up to $10 million. Okay, so projects, here's a little bit more information. This comes from one of the webinars. They explained what the difference of project is, and maybe this will answer one of the questions about salary. So it's closely related activities towards a common purpose or goal, new and existing services or investments, funded in whole or in part by these dollars, aligned to one expenditure category only, although again, that government services category is pretty huge. And it says that you have flexibility to define the project, and it gives a little bit more information there. So that's what they say, a project is. And again, that kind of, as I read that, it leads me more to thinking that you might be reporting separate projects under that government, under the revenue backfill category. There's another question about that unique ID. So again, there's all kinds of ID numbers in here, right? You got your SAMs, you got the new SAMs, you got the DUNS, you got the, and then there's project specific identifiers. So there's 2 different tabs, right? We've got, I'm scrolling back now. Here on the recipient profile, one of the first screens that you're going to get to, it's got the DUNS number. And here you may have to put in that new SAMS number. I wouldn't be surprised, the unique entity identifier, UEI. So you might want to add that into there. Oh, the state assigned unique ID. That might be the UEI right here. If you hover over it, it might explain that. It also asks for your taxpayer identification number. So there's, see what's filled out. That DAS number that was assigned to you, that probably is going to be pre-filled out in one of these fields, I would suspect. So, but then on the project specific, here's that pop-up again. It asks for the recipient project ID. I think that is the number that you guys get to assign. Very little of our recipient info was filled out. Okay, and hopefully you I don't know, if you added some information in the category or in that box and told them, that they could do that. Okay, I'm gonna move on here though. So again, we had talked about what a project is. Probably you're gonna do multiple projects. So here you filled one out, and again, he did that 10 million, 5 million, kind of not very helpful. But then you could just hit that add new project button, and then you could add a second project for a different activity. Okay, so you've done that. You've done your projects. You've reported on those, what you've obligated and expended so far. The next tab you need to go to is this recipient specific tab. And so, and here's the answer, here's the magic question, right? The one time, your one bite at the apple here, is your jurisdiction electing to use the standard allowance of up to 10 million, not to exceed your total award allocation for identifying revenue loss? And I very much encourage you to answer yes. Now, it's going to say revenue loss due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So you're entering the loss. This is the total award, all right, including both tranches and including that plus up payment that Janet referenced. So what happened was you got your first tranche, the big check, okay? Then all the cities in Oregon had an opportunity to get money. One city, I'm not going to name names, chose not to take the dollars. And then their money that would have gone to them got sent out to all of you, distributed out pro rata. So a lot of you probably got a check from Department of Administrative Services, the Oregon Treasury for like $50. And you're like, what the heck is this? Well, that was that plus up payment, right? And so how much is your total award going to be? Our best guess today is that it's going to be double what you've received so far. So that's going to include the big check you got, that little plus up check. It's going to be 2 times that amount. That's what we expect you're going to get. And I have a link here to a spreadsheet on the LOC website. If you click on that link, it'll drop an Excel file into your browser that has what we anticipate. And again, it's our best guess right now. It's the best I can do. What we and DAS has seen it, and they agree that it's the best that they can do as well. But it's what we anticipate that you will receive total. And so you'll want to use Bev, you might have missed that check. I mean, it could have been like $10. Yes, you should get double the plus up amount too. So if you go to that spreadsheet though, which is on the LOC website, there's a number of columns. It has your big check, what your little check was. It has what your next payment is expected to be. And then it has the total, and you're going to want to use the total number off of that spreadsheet. And that is, again, it'll be basically double what you've gotten so far, including that little secondary payment. We expect that the third payment is going to include both the regular allocation, what you were told at the very beginning you were getting, plus that plus up. So you, in the end, you probably might only get 3 checks. I'm not sure about that, but the amount will basically be double what you've received so far. Yep, double the amount plus the plus up amount too. All right, and again, this document, this thing's going to get posted on probably Monday noon, and it'll be on the front page of the LOC website. And this is a hyperlink that you can click on to get that document. All right, and then it says, please provide an explanation of how revenue replacement funds were allocated to government services. And so, you know, you're going to want to match what's going on in your project specific reporting. But here you're going to be entering all of it. So you're going to say, we anticipate, you know, at this point, we have only obligated and expended X amount of dollars, but we anticipate that we will be spending, you know, $300,000 for a water replacement project. We anticipate, you know, might give a little more detail. We're going to do this much, but, you know, this field is probably character limited. I don't even know how much you can type in there. So you want to be explicit, what you're spending, what you know, what you don't know. You want to, you know, you want to be descriptive enough so that they can understand what it is. But again, I think it's probably character limited. Some of these fields you can only do 250 characters. I think you can only do 250 characters maybe for the project description. I'm not sure about that, but someone said it on the call I was on. All right. So now you've done this. You've hit the easy button. All right. Now, the last thing that you need to do, again, that was under that recipient specific tab. Last thing you have to do is certify. So you're going to review what's in there so far. And then the only person who can actually sign off on this is the authorized representative for reporting. They'll need to go ahead and certify and submit. And then it'll take you to a survey. You don't have to do the survey if you don't want to, but you certainly can. And then, but there should be a green box there that says that you've successfully uploaded your report. So I hate to say things when I have not gotten into a system and I don't actually, you know, I haven't experienced this myself, so I don't know 100% that's true. But supposedly, you are absolutely able to go in and revise the report after you have submitted. up until April 30th. After that, it kind of locks. So that is what I've been told by members of other municipal leagues, including at least one woman who was actually able to get into the system and do it herself. So submitting, if you submit and then you have a problem later, you may be able to, there might be something you can do about that, but let's just play it safe and make sure that we got the right answer before we hit that button. But just so you know, there may be an ability to fix it after the fact. So we're getting towards the end here. Keep good records, all right? Again, reduced reporting does not mean that it reduces your requirements for spending these dollars necessarily. So, I have asked some questions through the NLC, some hard questions of Treasury, and I have not gotten great answers. I'll tell you one that I asked was, okay, so normally transportation projects are not allowed under the infrastructure category, right? It's only water, sewer, and broadband. And in the infrastructure category, water, sewer, and broadband have to meet more or less the standards of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. So the question I asked was, in revenue replacement, you're allowed to do transportation projects, which are not allowed infrastructure under the infrastructure category. Could you also do a water project that did not meet the standards of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund or the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund? In other words, does putting it into revenue replacement absolve you of the responsibility to meet the standards of the infrastructure category itself if you're doing a water project? Crickets. There's no answer to that question. And so I'm throwing that out there. Somebody can come back later and say, hey, you should have met that. I'll give you another example. Treasury has clearly said that on the premium pay standards, that if you are giving premium pay to folks who have a wage and income that's greater than 150% of the state or county, I think it's median income, then you have to do a written justification. Treasury's also said you can report those premium pay as under the revenue loss category, right? Under that 6.1 category. So in that case, you're not going to be required to give the written justification for giving premium pay to, say, the manager at your sewer plant or to one of your department heads, right? You're not going to be required to submit that written justification in that category. If you did it in the regular premium pay category, they would ask you for that. So does that mean you don't have to do it? I don't know, but I would write it up. I would want to have it in my file, that written justification for why I decided to give those higher wage workers premium pay, because my sewer plant manager was showing up every day in the height of COVID, risking getting sick. And, 3 of his guys were out and he was basically living there. And, I would want to write it up just so I had it in my file. So if somebody comes back later and asks a question, you've got that information. So again, Treasury may, or another entity, could be a newspaper, could be a resident doing a public information request. People are going to come and ask you about how you spent these dollars. So you really want to keep good information, the rationale, why you decided to do what you did, how things worked out. We gave some money to the food bank and then we made them report back later to us and they were able to distribute X number of meals. Metrics, things that you can point to later to show what a good job you did, because I know you guys are doing a good job. I know you're thinking really hard about how this money gets used and trying to get the most bang for your buck and doing a lot of projects around infrastructure that are going to be, there long after, you and I are gone. So, just make sure that you give yourself the credit. And part of that is making sure that you keep good records so folks know why you did it. So we still have a little bit of lack of clarity on audits. There's uniform audit requirements. I'm no expert on that stuff. I'm sure that there are people on this call who could run circles around me, but OGFOA certainly has gotten some correspondence, and I think some other folks have, that if there are certain criteria met, some of that guidance might not necessarily apply to you all on this revenue replacement stuff. So stay tuned on that, but it maybe is more of a question for your auditors. But certainly there's still some outstanding questions about what may be required. So keep good records. And then, really what this is about is the public trust. we legislators put so much trust in us on these dollars, and we do not want to let them down. You know, I want to be able to say what a great job we did down the road. And I know you do too. I know you all understand that. And I've talked to so many of you. I've seen you struggling with like little questions in the minutia about, you know, is this allowed? Is this not allowed? Is this the right thing to do? So I know you guys are working hard on it, and just keep track of your thought process and, you know, keep it in writing. So resources, again, these links are all available on the Treasury webpage, or a couple of them didn't get posted there for some reason, but they're actually on the Treasury's YouTube. But if you go to the Treasury, the normal ARPA page, which I'm guessing all of you have looked at many, many times, under the reporting tab over on the left, you'll see most of these documents there and links to these webinars. But again, this will be on the website, the LOC's website on Monday, and you can just click into any one of these documents and check them out. Okay. All right, so here we are, question time. So we've answered a lot of questions in chat kind of as we went along. Susan just put some information. I just went to the recipient profile under the report section, and to the right it showed the state unique ID, shows at the beginning of the report name. So that information must be preloaded. Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful. Certainly happy to answer any questions now that you folks might have, things that, you know, kind of popped up for you during this presentation and you think could be of concern of other folks. You guys have not been shy in the chat, and I think I've done a decent job of keeping up in there. If there was something from the chat that I missed, certainly feel free to throw it out there again. I was having a little bit of a hard time keeping up. Joe, I see you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. This is Joe Barker from the City of Drain, counselor. You did a wonderful job making the presentation, but apparently I must be dense as a doornail. Is the sunset provision for claiming the lost revenue April 30th?
Sure.
That's the actual deadline date to claim the $10 million.
Well, okay, so couple things. So under the old formula, you would have to do a calculation at the end of each calendar year to determine what your loss had been for that year. And so it was going to be, calculations were going to be made into the future. Here in the April 30th report, all right, when you go in to file, you will make a one-time election as to whether you would like to continue to follow that formula and do calculations at the end of each calendar year until this program ends in 2026, I think, or 2024. So you will make a decision whether you want to continue to use that formula, or we're really encouraging you to take this one-time $10 million assumed amount for revenue loss. And yeah, it has to be done in this report, which is due April 30th. Now, I don't want to, I'm so disinclined to tell people that, you know, oh, if you don't get it filed by April 30th, it'll be okay. You know, I don't want to tell people that, but I have not heard that you're going to lose your second tranche if you don't get it filed by April 30th. I have not heard that, you know, you won't have the ability to make the, to file this April 30th report, you know, a couple of weeks later. You will get a nasty, nasty piece of correspondence from the U.S. Treasury about how you're not doing your job. But cool. You know, I would really, really encourage folks to get it in by April 30th. I think we went through it. It's not that, it's not an impossible feat for you to get this done by April 30th. And I would make that one-time election.
I understand that, but what if there aren't any administrative projects programmed?
You still need to report.
Okay, so we just make up a hypothetical?
No, you just don't report any projects. You haven't spent any, you haven't obligated any money, you haven't spent any money, but you still need to go in and report so that they know that you haven't spent any money. And you need to complete this election for that you're going to take the revenue replacement, and you need to put in the amount of your revenue loss, which is the full amount of your award.
And it's separate and distinct from the triage money, the SHRESH money, whatever. however you pronounce it. The first allotment that we received last year, the 130 some odd thousand.
Yeah, that's roughly half of it, right? So you got 130,000, then, you know, a month later, you may not have even noticed or known what it was for, but you got another check from Treasury or from the Oregon Treasury for like $60, say, and, you know, and so it's double that amount. And again, there's a link in this PowerPoint to our estimate of what your full award, including that plus up payment, where you got a share of the money of the one city that chose not to take their ARPA dollars.
So it's an either or between the first disbursement or the $10 million.
It's up to $10 million. Okay,
huh?
okay, sure. It's up to $10 million.
Okay.
So,
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Got it.
but it doesn't. You don't get $10 million, right? And some people have asked Treasury that question. When they saw the $10 million standard allowance, they were like, "Sweet, we're getting 10 million instead of the 250,000 that we were promised." No, you can take the standard allowance for any amount up to a maximum of $10 million, but we're telling you, please take it for your full award, and it will make your life easier on the reporting side.
Thank you.
You bet. Michael?
Hi, Mark. Can you hear me all right?
I can, yeah.
Hey, so this is kind of redundant, but so you have the list of our tranches. It's been adjusted now, right? You said double on the second one than we did the first one. Did I hear that correctly?
No, it's 2 times what you've received so far. So, you know, your first tranche was roughly half of what you were going to receive.
Right.
And so you're going to get the second half 1 year later, which we anticipate will be around July 1st.
That's what my understanding was too. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then you kind of answered my question earlier from the chat where I was just asking, like, so we claimed this $10 million loss, and then we just put in what we've already programmed the money for and how we've spent it to date, even though we haven't received the second tranche yet.
Correct. Yeah. So in the project area, you're going to report on any obligations and expenditures,
Right.
For projects that you currently have, right?
The project.
So that's going to be,
right?
it's going to be a pretty low number, right? You maybe haven't, you know, spent that much yet.
Yeah.
But then on the area where you report your loss, your revenue loss, you're going to report the amount of your full award, because you want to be able down the road, as you spend more money, you want to be able to spend that in this revenue replacement category as well.
Right. So in the project description, we just list how our council identified how they want to spend the money, right?
Again, that's going to be kind of up to you, because because of that definition of obligation and expenditure, right? So you're going to read that and you're going to try and decide, okay, because my council decided that they were going to spend this money, does that mean that the money's obligated? Maybe you're going to think about it twice and you're going to be like, well, they could change their mind. So I haven't signed any contracts with anybody. So maybe it's not technically obligated, but maybe you're going to feel like it's a done deal and you're going to put it in there as obligated. And I don't think that, you know, I don't know, you read the language and you do what you think is the best answer on that.
Right.
Sorry, I can't be.
No, that's fine. I think I've got some this has really helped. It's been a great direction. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Bev.
Yes, we did not get that second check, and I just went on the spreadsheet and it's a difference of like $783. I can't read my own writing. Should I just take what you think that the total amount on the spreadsheet is and do that? If we go over, I know that we don't get more.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Okay, and the other question I had was, not knowing what I know now after this webinar, our council basically picked what projects they want to do. It's not really obligated. It's going to be in our next budget, so it's not really an adopted budget yet. But it will be before June 30th. Should I put that as obligated?
Yeah, I don't know. So here again, an obligation is an order placed for property and services, contracts and subawards made, and similar transactions that require payment. An expenditure is the amount that's been incurred as a liability of the entity. The service has been rendered or the good has been delivered to the entity. So obligations are less strict than expenditures. But it's really up to you, Bev, on whether your council action, you consider that to be an obligation. I don't know that it necessarily would be reading that definition, but if you don't report it now, right, you can report it a year from now.
Right.
So
well,
it doesn't.
No, I will be retired a year from now, but my
Well,
replacement.
it'll be the
can do
next
that.
person's problem. You won't have to worry about it at all. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And speaking of retirements, Bev, well, congratulations on yours. But another question that I have gotten from a few different people is that when we originally signed up with the State Department of Administrative Services, we had one person who was doing the reporting for us, and that's the person that got put into the treasury system. And now nobody at my city is able to get in and actually get into the account. And so for that, I would point you to these. Oh shoot, I just killed it, didn't I? Okay, at the last slide, there is there's a treasury email and phone number that's there that you can call when you try and get into the system and you realize that it was somebody, 2 city recorders ago that was actually signed up, and nobody has access to her email any longer. So you can contact them and get that done. My microphone doesn't work, but doesn't this report cover the period from the beginning of the program until March 31st, 2022? Okay, that is probably, Nate, I bet you're right. And if I said April 30th, I probably, I misspoke probably. I would not be surprised if you're correct on that. Trying to find it. There's a chart somewhere in one of these many lovely documents from the US Treasury that does it. And that's kind of a basic question. I kind of wish that I had the answer at hand. Does anybody else have an opinion on that? Okay. So yeah, so I'm looking, there's a table in the compliance and reporting guidance document. And it says quarterly project and expenditure report timeline. Oh no, here we go, better yet. Annual project and expenditure report timeline. Period covered March 3rd, 2021 through March 31st, 2022. Due date April 30th. So thank you very much, Nate, for that correction. So this reporting will cover through the end of March. All right, anybody else? Oh, Susan?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So for Bev's question on the amount, I'm logged in and I went to my the reporting section, and there's this little draft box to the right once you get in there. And that's where I found my unique state ID number. It also has the allocated amount at the very bottom, and like our number matches exactly the amount I expected with that little bit in both tranches. So that might be a place to start to look for that information.
Oh, that's super helpful to know. And which screen was that on again?
It's when I went into the area where you're going to do the reporting, and where you showed the introduction bulk templates and stuff. The second thing is the recipient profile. I share my screen, but I don't think I can. Off to the right of that recipient profile is a draft box, which you probably aren't getting if you're in as a test.
So what, I'm sorry, Susan, what city are you with?
I'm with City of Astoria.
Astoria, I'm sorry that I didn't know that. And so I have you here on my spreadsheet as getting, I'm going to out you. you've got quite the award. $2,224,481, basically. Is that what it's showing?
$80.94, and that's
That's what,
exactly.
okay, that's perfect. That's what my
That's
spreadsheet's showing. Okay.
And that's exactly what this little draft box to the right of the recipient profile shows when you're in that reporting area where you're going to do your expenditures and certification and stuff.
Great. Great. And so just so everybody kind of knows what we're talking about again, you know, the first check that you got almost, you know, a little less than a year ago was for $1,112,000. And then you got this little plus up payment that was $625. And so if your award was much smaller than that, your plus up payment may have been like, you know, $30. It may not have really stuck out to you. So that made your total for the first tranche between the main payment and the plus up, $1,112,000. And we basically think that in the end, you're going to get double that. So you're going to get $2,224,000. And that's the number that you want to report as your revenue loss when you go in and make that one-time election to use the standard allowance, right? So it could be up to 10 million, but all you guys are getting is 2,224,000. All what you guys are getting is 2,224,000. That's the amount that you will report as your revenue loss, and that frees you up as you go and do your reporting later to report all of these dollars into that revenue replacement category.
I guess I'm still confused about that, Mark. So are you saying that we should do that even if we're not planning on doing revenue reporting loss?
It's up to you. I mean, you know, Astoria's got a lot of resources, right? And maybe you want to be an overachiever. You know, I'm not going to talk about some of the other cities I've talked to, but they had done so much work. They had dotted I's, crossed T's, made sure that their projects qualified under, say, infrastructure, the infrastructure requirements. And so that's how they wanted to do it. They wanted to report in there, and you certainly can do that. And but you know, Treasury has been pretty clear that, you know, this is the easy button. It's meant for cities less than 50,000, and they designed it for you to make your life easier. And they're encouraging folks to use it. You know, we're not going to get anything more explicit than them out of that, but they've made it very clear that if you have an infrastructure project that meets all the infrastructure category requirements, you are welcome to report that into the infrastructure category, or you can report it into the as a revenue replacement project. And the difference is how much information you're going to have to provide in this computer system. So if you want to make things easier on yourself, you can do it as revenue replacement. But if you've gone through, you've probably already done most of the work already. If you want to go ahead and report it as a project, that is your that's an option.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so great questions. I'm not seeing anything else right now, so I'm going to go ahead and conclude the what if your recipients who receive money but does not fall under the revenue replacement project, are you not allowed to use that option? No, even if you have subrecipients, you can use the revenue replacement option. And again, describe the project just like you in that little text box, but you will not have to do reporting in this April 30th report about your subrecipients. Now, they may come back later and ask for some more information. Subrecipients are something that we talked about a lot under the interim final rule, and it got clarified a little bit in the final rule. But the bottom line is that, there's beneficiaries and subrecipients. If you give money to a food bank, and the expectation is that they're going to take that money and deliver X number of meals out to the residents, then they're probably a subrecipient, right? They are basically, you're giving them money to do your job. And what that means is that you're responsible for making sure that they spend that money in accordance with the American Rescue Plan Act guidance, with that final rule. And so you need to, track that. You need to make sure that those dollars go where they're supposed to go, and that they spend them in a way that meets, all the requirements of the program. Not that they would, but if they were to, do something goofy around only giving meals to, people of a certain race or ethnicity or something, that would probably violate that civil rights agreement that you had signed on to. So you got to make sure that that kind of stuff doesn't happen with your subrecipients. Normally, if you report it in the economic support category, you would have to do some subrecipient reporting and talk about those subrecipients and what you've done to make sure that they were following the rules. If you report it into revenue replacement, still an ability, but you won't have to do that subrecipient reporting. But again, if you recall, I circled, it said in April. So I would not be surprised if Treasury comes back later and asks you to explain what you did to make sure that your subrecipients are following the law. How would the report look if none of the funds are set to be spent until next budget year? It's up to you again, Sally. If they're obligated, you can report them as obligated, even though they're not expended. But look at that definition of obligation and make that determination. But it could be that you don't have any projects to report yet because you haven't spent any money. That's also a possibility. But maybe when you go into the revenue loss category, you might say, listen, we're not reporting any projects as obligated or expended yet. We don't think they meet the definition, but we have had conversations and we anticipate that we're going to be spending X dollars on this, X dollars on that. You could do something like that if you wanted to, though I don't know that you're necessarily required. Maybe you could just put in that revenue replacement description that, we will be using these money for general government services, but we have not obligated or expended any funds at this time. You could maybe say that too. But I would certainly say something along the lines of we've had a lot of conversations. We're reaching out to our constituents. We're having council meetings. Show that you've done some work on figuring out how to spend the money if you think that's appropriate. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. I just want to say thanks everybody for attending today, and thank you for all the questions. And thanks for the save, Nate, on the date, and but most of all, thanks for all the hard work that you guys have been doing. I know that that this is not easy. I know that there's a lot of requirements that you're trying to meet, and I really appreciate all the work that you do, and it has been a great opportunity for me to get to meet a lot of you. I've appreciated that as well. So thank you so much, and hang on here for 1 second, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you.